the legitimate powers of the President of the United States is not determined by the President of the United States or the Vice President of the... Take that down.
Well,
Vice President of the United States. No, listen to me. Listen. You need to understand. Everybody needs to understand in reading this.
Well, this morning, if you were watching MSNBC, you saw... I'm sorry. You weren't watching MSNBC. Give you a break. Nobody was. But if by happenstance you couldn't find your remote control and your liberal babysitter left the channel on MSNBC, you saw Joe and Mika very, very, very angry. I mean, just look at her. She's, yikes. Mika, what's going on, man? Is Joe that bad? Yeah, he probably is. You'd look like that if you were married to Joe Scarborough. Here's what Mika had to say about the Trump administration's efforts to make our government efficient.
Elon Musk and Doge. Musk slammed the judge, calling him corrupt and writing on social media that he needs to be impeached. He even floated a new idea that the quote, worst 1% of appointed judges should be fired every year. That post has received almost 300,000 likes. Vice President JD Vance also chimed in on social media. The Yale Law School graduate argued, quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. And Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who also went to law school, posted about the decision multiple times from his personal account. He wrote that he agreed with the vice president's position, calling it 100% accurate. He also called the ruling a judicial coup. So, Joe, there does seem to be kind of a lead up to something majorly unprecedented.
All right, hold on. We're going to continue, but I just need to jump in here and point out, first off, they're outraged that, what was it JD Vance said, that a judge can't infringe on an executive's, on the executive branch's legitimate power, and that upsets them? No, that's 100%. Of course, it's 100% true. Mike Lee, he also has a law degree. These two, by the way, I don't believe do have a law degree, but they're absolutely outraged. And by the way, weren't they just supporting the president and the presidential candidate and the party that wanted to completely upend the Supreme Court, pack it with a bunch of his own appointees, change the number of people on the bench, be able to impeach Supreme Court justices, have term limits on Supreme Court justices? They were great with that, but now they're outraged that the sitting vice president is pushing back on a lower federal judge and Obama appointees' total infringement on the power of the executive branch. What other thing? Didn't Joe Biden just brag that he circumvented a Supreme Court decision about relieving student loan debt? Remember? He was on the campaign trail back when he had a campaign saying, even the Supreme Court said I couldn't relieve student loan debt, but I went ahead and did it anyway. And they loved him for it. And now they're upset about a constitutional crisis that the vice president is criticizing a federal judge's decision. Okay, I just wanted to throw that out there for context. You have the context. Now take it away, morning joke.
And that will require a lot of questions as to what the next step is. But let's keep it right here for now.
The tweet, though, was circular.
Oh, no.
It made no sense. And it made no sense because the legitimate powers of the President of the United States is not determined by the President of the United States or the Vice President of the... Take that down.
Well,
Vice President of the United States. No, listen to me. Listen. You need to understand. Everybody needs to understand in reading this. It is the Supreme Court of the United States who determines what the legitimate power of the president is, of the vice president is, of what Congress is. That is the way it has been since John Marshall was the first Supreme Court justice.
All right, I hate to jump in again, but I just know that you're smart enough to know this, but I just want to reiterate that it's not true that the Supreme Court determines the legitimate power of the executive branch. You know the real answer. The Constitution determines the legitimate power of the executive branch. Now, we've had presidents who have overstepped the legitimate powers of the executive branch, and at times it takes the Supreme Court to determine one way or the other if they have overstepped the executive powers and the legitimate powers of the executive branch. For instance, when Joe Biden just unilaterally, outside of the confines of law, forgave student loan debt. for tens of thousands of Americans. That's when the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that because the Constitution says you can't. Not because the Supreme Court says you can't, because the Constitution says you can't. But the way Joe Scarborough is saying, it's the Supreme Court that has final veto power over all of these things. And well, that's just not true. I hate to break it to you, Joe Scarborough, but sometimes the Supreme Court can be wrong. For instance, they were wrong when they determined Roe v. Wade. Thankfully, it took 50 years, but it was reversed. You're not telling me you think the Supreme Court is always right about these things, do you? Did you support the Dred Scott decision? Do you think the Supreme Court was correct in the Dred Scott decision, Joe Scarborough? I didn't think so. No, the Supreme Court doesn't determine these things. The Constitution determines these things. And sometimes judges, all the way up to Supreme Court justices, get it wrong. I just wanted, again, a little more context. All right, take it back, Joe.
This is trolling. And I will say, and we will give examples for Mike Lee, who also went to law school, to say this is a, quote, judicial coup. This is all planned. They decided they were going to do these things that pushed the boundary of the law, that went over the line. This is all planned. Mm-hmm. Because let me tell you something. Again, we're going to show you a list of presidential actions that were enjoined, stopped, overturned during the Biden administration. And we could go back and do the same thing during the Bush administration, during the Clinton administration. This is how things are. So when you say a court cannot stop a president from doing what's in its legitimate power to do, well, yes, of course that's true. But it is the court that determines the contours of that power. It's that simple. Let's bring around conservative attorney George Conway. George,
No, he didn't do that. Oh, Kevin said I had to let this clip run all the way to the end because I was going to. Did he really just introduce George Conway as conservative attorney? George Conway. And look at him. Even George can't believe it. Wait a minute. Something got messed up on my intro. I'm not conservative. It's me, George Conway. Oh, that's delicious. That's absolutely delicious. Also, by the way, Joe Scarborough letting all 12 of his viewers know that this was all planned. This is all part of the grand strategy to circumvent the Constitution and create a dictatorship. This was all planned in advance because, after all, when have Joe and Mika ever been wrong about anything that Donald Trump does, right? So I'm sorry, what? Oh, they're always wrong about? Oh, okay. All right. Never mind. Maybe this wasn't always planned. All right. So JD Vance, he tweets out about this. This all started with a tweet from JD Vance, as you saw. If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. I think everybody knows that, right? If a judge tried to command the attorney general in how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, or prosecutress in this case, that's also illegal. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. Then the key word there is legitimate. And no, it's not up to the judge to decide what's legitimate, what's not. It's in the Constitution. It's up to the judge to misinterpret the Constitution, perhaps. And Lord knows we've seen that over the years. So Adam Schiff, the freshman senator from California, decides to reply. Yes, that Adam Schiff, the one who consistently lied in Congress and on television about Russian collusion and still hasn't faced any penalty for it. JD, we both went to law school, but we don't have to be lawyers to know what ignoring court decisions we don't like puts on a dangerous path to lawlessness. We just have to swear an oath to the Constitution and mean it. Boy, I'm sorry. That is just dripping with hypocrisy and double standards. And, well, it's Adam Schiff. I guess we all expected that. Well, and then here's my favorite part of this entire chain. Town Hall's very own Kurt Schlichter, and one of my best buddies. He wrote the foreword to my book, by the way, Shameless Liars, about the media. He wrote the foreword. You should get the book. What if the judicial decision is lawless? Kurt asks Adam Schiff. A key component of the constitutional framework. By the way, Kurt also has a law degree. Thank you very much. He's been a practicing lawyer for the last 30 years. A key component of the constitutional framework is judicial modesty, which is backed up by the fact that the judiciary has nothing to compel obedience except its credibility. See, I'm a lawyer too, but the difference, Adam, is that I'm a good one. By the way, my favorite part about this Kurt Schlichter response is that got retweeted by the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, as if Schlichter needed a bigger head or a bigger ego at this point. But he's absolutely dead on right about this. That didn't stop really brilliant lawyers like Jamie Raskin from chiming in. This is all they've been talking about on MSNBC. It's like nothing else has happened in the world, which is fine, by the way. When Joe Scarborough says this is all part of the plan, I will concede this much. It is a little bit a part of the plan that the Trump administration puts little things out there to distract idiots like Joe Scarborough, so they focus on that while real work is being done over here. So you got to hand it to them. It's brilliant. Here's Jamie Raskin chiming in.
I've been at rallies all week because, you know, a rally a day keeps the fascists away. But it was bugging me that these guys, Elon Musk's, you know, midnight fascist crew of teenagers and 20-somethings have been able to access everybody's computer data in the country. And that's why a lot of the courts are getting involved. Could there be a nationwide class action lawsuit to follow up on last week's victories against Musk, against the Trump administration for this breach in computer security and the data of all American taxpayers? It could be a class action suit on behalf of all Americans. If the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers want to opt out and they don't want their part of the money for the contamination of their data, fine, they can opt out. But really, it's a suit on behalf of everybody because that's our information.
Right.
It doesn't belong to Elon Musk or his little midnight crew. It belongs to the people, and the government has to hold it in trust. Now, there's specific statutes which say that information can only be accessed for tax purposes, for the purposes of the internal revenue system, and for no other purposes. What are they using that information for?
Yeah, Michael Steele, former chairman of the RNC, really intrigued by the idea of a class action lawsuit. After all, he's just making MSNBC money, so maybe he can wet his beak as well. This is desperation. What did he call them? The Midnight Crew, Elon Musk's Midnight Crew. What a pathetic fool this man is. Yes, we need a class action lawsuit, and we'll sue Elon Musk personally and take all of his billions and divide it up amongst all Americans, because never let a socialist commie like Jamie Raskin ever set aside his redistribution of wealth mythology when it comes to any sort of government action. So that's how they're going to get Elon Musk. And of course, the birth of the new lawfare movement. They've got nothing. They're desperate. They're scrambling. This is the best he could come up with. It's amazing to me. You know, all of our personal data was accessed and hacked into during the Biden administration by the Chinese Communist Party. Did you know that? Oh, yes, it happened. Go ahead and Google it. Did you see Jamie Raskin upset about that? Did you hear Jamie Raskin say anything about commies in Beijing accessing your personal information through the government system when they hacked in? No, not a damn thing you didn't hear. But he's really upset that Elon Musk and American employees of the federal government at the direction of the president accessing payment systems to make our government less corrupt and more efficient. Let me explain what they're doing here. They go in and they access the payment systems and the personnel systems because they want to know the organizational structure of every agency, who works for who makes decisions, and where the money is going. That's how you fix corruption in an agency. And they're not sitting there asking people, oh, so what's your job here? Explain to me, show me on the organizational chart where you sit. No, they're going in and they're looking at it and they're quickly figuring out exactly where all the bodies are buried. And that's why they're panicking right now. And they're lying to you. They're lying to you that your security was breached in some way by these people. It's an absolute, total fraudulent lie. But we'll let Donald Trump, the guy who's actually in charge of all of this, we'll let him have the final word. As he was soaring over the Gulf of America on his way to the Super Bowl, he did another one of those impromptu press conferences, this time in the Air Force One version of the Oval Office, had all the reporters who were on the plane come on up from the back. I don't think they ever got to do this during Joe Biden's presidency, mostly because Jill was sitting in that chair doing the work while Joe was sleeping in the room next door. Here's what the president had to say.
A couple of court losses, Mr. President, and JD Vance said judges aren't allowed to control the executive power. What's your take on that?
Well, we're going to see what happens. We have a long way to go, and we're talking about fraud, waste, abuse. And when a president can't look for fraud and waste and abuse, we don't have a country anymore. So we're very disappointed with the judges that would make such a ruling. But we have a long way to go. We have to find all of the fraud that's going on. We have tremendous fraud, tremendous waste, and tremendous abuse, and theft, by the way. And the day you're not allowed to look for theft and fraud, etc., then we don't have much of a country. So no judge should frankly be allowed to make that kind of a decision. It's a disgrace.
Yeah, it is a disgrace, and it is a constitutional crisis when the judicial branch tries to infringe on the executive branch in the way that they did right now. Joe and Mika are right. This is definitely unprecedented, and it's a constitutional crisis, but not in the way they think. JD Vance posting something on X, the Everything app, about his displeasure with this federal judge's decision. That's not a constitutional crisis. A sitting judge, an Obama appointee somewhere in New York, where he was shopped for so that they could get the decision that they wanted. Him putting a halt to the executive branch's efforts to root out corruption, and even barring the Secretary of the Treasury from seeing the Treasury Department's payment systems. That's a constitutional crisis. That's the judicial branch through one judge infringing on the executive branch at almost the highest levels. And that's got to stop. Trump knows it. You know it. Everybody knows it. And it'll be resolved very soon. I hope the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, John Roberts, is paying attention because he knows better. I know he knows better. Have you seen the news from economists forecasting a depression, not a recession, a depression by the year 2030? See, we've got this perfect storm brewing. Congress is going to try to do something about it, but it's going to be hard. See, we got Social Security and Medicare hitting a breaking point. We got the largest generation hitting retirement. We got a smaller workforce, which means smaller tax funds funding those programs. And then a growing national debt, rising cost of living. We have a problem right now. So what are you going to do about it? Well, you can do something to protect your own family's future. Gold can be a safe haven in hard economic times. And Birch Gold, well, they make it easy to diversify a portion of your savings into actual physical gold. Birch Gold will help you transition an IRA, an existing IRA you've already got, or a 401k you've already got, into an IRA in physical gold. And it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. Protect your future today. Text Larry to 989898. My name, Larry, Larry, to 989898. Get your free info kit on gold, and you'll get a copy of The Ultimate Guide for Gold in the Trump Era with a foreword by Donald Trump Jr. There's no obligation, only information. Text My Name, Larry, to number 989898. Do it today.